Picture a house on a Caribbean island. Warm night. Windows open. The ocean somewhere out there in the dark. Inside, three of the most famous musicians alive are making the biggest record of their lives, and not one of them is in the same room as another one. There is a camera pointed at the drummer. There is a man in the middle with a talkback button. And for 6 weeks, that man is the only reliable way any of them can say anything to each other. I have known this record my whole life. I did not know this until I went looking. Number 10. They went back to paradise on purpose. I have a real soft spot for records made in beautiful places. There is something about knowing that a song you love came out of a room with the windows open and the sea outside. It changes the temperature of the thing. So here is where we start. December of 1982. The police fly back to AIR Studios on the island of Montserrat. The studio George Martin built, the Beatles producer, on a green volcanic island most tourists never bothered with. They had already made Ghost in the Machine there. It had gone well. They knew the building, they knew the light, they knew where everything was. They booked about 6 weeks. And here is the part I did not know until I started digging. They did not go back because things were good. They went back because the building was the only thing left they could agree on. Stewart Copeland has a line about this band that I cannot get out of my head. He said the Police was a band that exploded on stage and imploded in the studio. And that is the whole thing right there. On stage, they were untouchable. 3 people, no filler, every one of them carrying more weight than they would have in a bigger band. And in the studio, that same math turned on them. Fewer people means fewer places to hide. By 1982, Sting was writing almost everything. Andy Summers had been in this band for 5 years and had realized somewhere along the way that he was working with 2 very difficult men. And Stewart, who is one of the most alive drummers who has ever sat behind a kit, was being told what to play. They flew to paradise to make a masterpiece, and what they brought with them was a Cold War. And before we go further, there is one entry on this list where the story behind the song changed the way I hear it. Permanently. Not slightly. Permanently. We will get there, and I think it is going to do the same thing to you. Number 9. The floor plan. When you imagine a band recording, you imagine a room. Everybody facing each other. Somebody counts it in. That is the picture we all carry, and it is the picture that makes us love bands in the first place. The idea that 4 or 3 people in a room can build something none of them could build alone. Now, here is what was actually happening on Montserrat. Hugh Padgham, the producer, is in the control room behind a Neve desk. Sting is in there with him. Bass, headphones, bouncing on a jogging mat, playing his parts from inside the control room. Andy Summers is downstairs in the live room, the big one, the one George Martin built, with his amps and his guitars. And Stewart Copeland is not in the studio at all. Stewart Copeland is upstairs, in the dining room, of a separate house on the property.
What do you say?
Alone. That is not a metaphor I am reaching for. That is the actual room assignment. The drummer of the biggest band in the world set up his kit in a dining room in a different building, and that is where the drums on Every Breath You Take come from. Now, and this is the part that makes it complicated, it sounded incredible.
I can't hear you.
Padgham has said the drums sounded better up there than they did anywhere else on the property, and the bass was going straight into the desk, so there was no bleed between the instruments at all. Sonically, it is close to perfect. Every instrument arrives on tape clean and huge and separate. And when Padgham has been asked why they set it up that way, he has never pretended it was only about microphones. He has said it plainly. It worked sonically, and it worked socially. Meaning, it worked because Sting and Stewart were not in the same room, And if they had been in the same room, somebody was probably getting hit. I know you know this feeling from your own life. Sometimes the arrangement that keeps the peace is the arrangement that tells you the truth about the relationship. Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story. Number 8. The camera only pointed one way. Here is the thing about this band that nobody talks about enough. Everybody tells the separate room story. It is a great story. It gets repeated in every documentary and every anniversary article, and I have told it myself at parties. But almost nobody tells you the second half, which is how the rooms were connected. Because Stewart was in a different building, they had to run a camera. So they set one up in front of the drum kit, pointed at him, feeding back to the control room so Padgham and Sting could see him play. One camera, pointed at Stewart. He did not get one pointed back. He could not see them. He could only hear them if somebody in the control room deliberately pressed the talkback button and spoke into his headphones.
I have to tell a story of 1,000 rainy days.
Sit with that for a second, because I need you to picture it properly. You are one of the greatest drummers of your generation. You are alone in a dining room in a house on a volcanic island. You just played a take, a good one, maybe the best one, and you take your hands off the sticks, and there is nothing. No faces, no nods, no sound at all. Just a room and a camera watching you and silence in the headphones until somebody decides to talk to you.
Ask her if she'll marry me. Some old-fashioned.
Padgham has admitted that Stewart understandably got upset when they did not get straight on the talkback after a take. Of course he did. Anyone would. That is not a diva reaction. That is a human being sitting in a room waiting to find out if he still exists. And I know how that sounds. But stay with me, because this is the mechanism the whole album runs on.
It's a big enough umbrella, but it's always.
Every note of communication on this record had to pass through one man and one button. Every note. You have felt a version of this. Maybe not with a camera. Maybe it was a group chat you got quietly moved out of. Or a conversation that started going through somebody else instead of coming to you. The specific details are different. The feeling is not.
I have to tell a story of 1,000 rainy days.
Number 7, 10 days, nothing on tape. This is the one I have been waiting to get to, because it reframes everything. We talk about difficult sessions like they are colorful, fun stories, rock and roll being rock and roll, and then occasionally you find a detail that is not colorful at all, and it stops you. Hugh Padgham has said that at one point on Montserrat he worked full on for 10 days, and had nothing on tape that was playable. 10 days, on an island, on the clock, with A&M waiting and a manager waiting, and the biggest band in the world downstairs, upstairs, and next door, refusing to be in the same room. He has said that he called his manager back home and told him straight out that he could not handle this. And I want to be careful here because it is easy to make Padgham the punchline of this story, the poor guy in the middle. But look at what he was actually holding. There were verbal fights, there were physical fights. He has described trying to step in, trying to be the producer, asking them if they really had to kick the lumps out of each other, and getting told to get out of it. What would you know? You do not know anything about us. That is the job he had, not producing, refereeing. And doing it while trying to get a hit record out of people who would not look at each other. Here is what gets me. Nothing on that album sounds like 10 wasted days. Nothing on that album sounds like a man on the phone saying he cannot do this. Synchronicity sounds calm. It sounds enormous and precise and completely in control. Some records don't just sound good. They know something about you. And some records are very, very good at not telling you what they cost.
To hurt they
Number 6. The Long Walk to George Martin's House. This one is my favorite, and I want to tell it properly. It got so bad on Montserrat that the band actually stopped. Not stopped for the day. Stopped. Andy Summers has described the atmosphere becoming completely unworkable. His own phrase for it was that it was like a screaming fight, and the sessions came to a genuine halt. And somebody had an idea. George Martin owned this studio. George Martin was on the island. George Martin was, at that moment, roughly across the valley. So they decided they should go and get George Martin. And Andy Summers got the job. Picture this. A grown man, guitarist in the biggest band on earth, walking off in the blazing Montserrat heat, across an island, to go and knock on the door of the man who produced the Beatles, because his band cannot be in a room together. He knocks. Martin comes out, invites him in, makes him tea. And Andy sits there and unloads all of it. And George Martin listens to the whole thing and says, and this is the part that makes me laugh every time, "Oh yes, right, I have seen that before." Of course he had. He had watched 4 men in Abbey Road take the greatest band in history apart from the inside. He had a whole PhD in this. Summers has said Martin essentially waved his magic wand. He told them to get on with it. Not a technique, not a production note. Just the calm of a man who had already sat through the end of something bigger and knew that the record still has to get made. And around the same stretch, their manager Miles Copeland, Stewart's brother, sat them all down by the pool and did his own version of the same job, and they went back in, and they finished it. I think about that walk a lot. A guy sweating across a Caribbean island to borrow somebody else's calm. That is what saved Synchronicity. Number 5. He wrote it on the drums. You just leaned in a little. I know, because I did the same thing when I found this. There is a photograph, and there is footage, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. Stewart Copeland's drumheads, during this era of the band, with a message written across them in marker pen. The message is 3 words. I am not going to say all 3 of them out loud. The first one is a hard 4-letter word, the last one is worse, and the middle one is off, written across his drums, facing forward, where he was looking every night, where the front rows could see it. For decades, the story attached to that photograph was very simple. Everybody assumed it was aimed at Sting. Flea has told the story of standing behind the stage at a police show, seeing it written across the toms, and understanding it as exactly that. And when the story gets retold, it is almost always retold as the drummer's message to the singer. And here is the part I did not expect. Stewart has spent years pushing back on it. He has said it was not directed at any individual. If it was aimed at anybody, he says, it was aimed at himself. He has described the pen it was written with as one he ended up with by accident. He has called it self-provocation. He has said it was written at a point in his life when there was so much fun and joy going on that the whole thing was a kind of jocular challenge with a twinkle in it. His words, roughly, and you already know what I am going to say, because you would have felt the same thing. Both of those can be true. It can be a joke and a warning at the same time. That is how people actually work. And if you have ever sent a message you framed as a joke that was extremely not a joke, you understand this perfectly. That is the mixtape you made for someone who never quite noticed what was on it. The message is right there on the surface. You just have to be looking. Number 4. The hi-hat. I need to tell you something about this record. The war that nearly ended the police was not about money, and it was not about the lyrics, and it was not really about the direction of the band. Not at the sharp end. At the sharp end, it was about a hi-hat. Here is the situation. Sting had fallen for a specific sound, the hi-hat coming off an Oberheim drum machine. That dry, hypnotic, absolutely metronomic tick. And in fairness to him, listen to the record. That relentlessness is a huge part of why every breath you take feels like being watched. The song is about surveillance. It sounds like a device, and Stewart, understandably, wanted to play his own hi-hat, because he is Stewart Copeland, and the hi-hat is where he lives.
I can't see the point in another day when nobody listens to a
Padgham has described the arguing in detail. Sting wanted Stewart to play something absolutely straight. No fills, nothing. And that was the exact opposite of everything Stewart is as a musician. Stewart would say he wanted to put his drum part on it. Sting would say he did not want Stewart's drum part on it. He wanted what he had asked for. Round and round. For days. Copeland has since said, publicly, that the moments when he came closest to wanting to genuinely end Sting's life were the moments when Sting came over to talk to him about the hi-hat. And this is where it stops being funny. Sting has said he spent half the Synchronicity tour with a broken rib after a backstage scuffle with Stewart. Stewart's version is that yes, he broke Sting's rib, but they were play fighting and the whole feud has been exaggerated. Which, again, both of those things are probably true.
I can't see the point in another day when nobody listens to a
And the fact that a broken rib is the disputed bit tells you everything. Here is what I cannot let go of. The drum part on the biggest song of 1983 was not played, not as a performance. Copeland has said it was composed, built entirely out of overdubs, assembled piece by piece, the most human-sounding record of that decade, and the drums were constructed like furniture, in a dining room, by a man who could not see anybody. Number 3. The song they were about to throw away. You know this one. We all know this one. It is the most played song in the history of American radio. BMI confirmed that formally in 2019.
with every step you take.
You have heard it in a supermarket in the last month. Your parents know it. Somebody's wedding has been ruined by a misreading of it. But sit with me for a minute because where this came from makes it sound different on the other side. 1982. Sting's marriage to Frances Tomelty has collapsed. He has begun a relationship with Trudy Styler, who was Frances's close friend. The British press is having the time of its life. So he does what you do. He leaves. He goes to Jamaica, to Goldeneye, outside Ocho Rios, the house where Ian Fleming wrote the Bond novels. He wakes up in the middle of the night with a line in his head, sits down at the desk and the piano, and writes it in about half an hour. He has told this story many times, and the timing shrinks depending on the telling, but the shape is always the same. It arrived nearly whole. He brought a demo to Utopia Studios in North London. Their manager, Miles Copeland, heard it and said, essentially, there is your hit, do not ruin it. Padgham has joked that his dog could have produced it and it still would have gone to number 1. And then they took it to Montserrat and nearly killed it. Because Sting and Stewart could not agree on how the bass and the drums were going to sit. That is it. That is the whole impasse. And it went on long enough that Summers has said the song was going to be thrown out, binned, gone. And at some point, Sting turned to Andy and said, fine, go on then. Go in there and make it your own. There was a Hammond organ part on the demo. Andy walked in and replaced it with that arpeggio, that figure, the one you can hum right now without trying. And he has said he did it in one take, and when he finished it, the room stood up and applauded. Number 2. What the Broken House Built Synchronicity came out in June of 1983. It went to number 1 in Britain, it went to number 1 in America and stayed there for 17 weeks, not all in a row, which means it kept climbing back up, and to do that in 1983, it had to shove Thriller out of the way. That is not a small sentence. Michael Jackson was in the middle of the most dominant run any album has ever had, and 3 men who would not speak to each other knocked him off the top. Over 8 million copies in the United States alone, 5 Grammy nominations at the 1984 ceremony, including Album of the Year, and 3 wins, with Every Breath You Take taking Song of the Year. The single went to number 1 in America for 8 weeks, 4 in Britain, and became the biggest American hit of the year. Even the sleeve was ridiculous. Norman Moore's design with those 3 colored bands, photographs by Dwayne Michaels, and they printed it in 36 different variations. Different color orders, different pictures. 36. If you bought that record in 1983, and your mate bought that record in 1983, there is a real chance you were holding two different objects. Record collectors have been quietly losing their minds about it ever since. And then there is the video for Synchronicity 2, directed by Godley and Krem, which I want you to go and watch tonight with everything you now know. Three men, on top of separate towers of scaffolding and junk, wind machines going, debris flying, each one completely alone in his own vertical column. They built a set that was a scale model of the sessions, and I do not think a single person watching MTV in 1983 clocked it. Then the tour. 105 shows across 3 continents, and on the 18th of August 1983, Shea Stadium, 70,000 people. The stadium the Beatles played. Sting thanked them for the loan of it. And that night, Sting turned to Andy Summers and said it does not get better than this, and we should stop. And Andy said yes, we should stop. Number 1. The man in the middle never left. The police never announced they had broken up. That is the first thing. The label did not want a headline, so there was no goodbye. Fans just waited, and then Sting put out a solo record, and everybody quietly understood. Then in 1986 they tried. 3 shows for Amnesty, and then a 3-week block of studio time their management had booked, hoping that if you put them in a room, something would happen. The day before those sessions began, Stewart came off a horse and broke his collarbone. Read that again. The one thing that had ever made this band work was playing together, in a room, live. And the drummer physically could not play. So they could not jam. They could not rebuild anything. They just sat there. What they attempted instead was a re-recording of Don't Stand So Close to Me with programmed drums. And Sting and Stewart spent days. Andy has said he did his guitar part on the first night and then watched, arguing about which machine to use, Fairlight or Synclavier, deleting each other's patterns, re-entering them, deleting them again. Stewart called that the straw that broke the camel's back, and said he could not work with them anymore. That single is the last thing the Police ever released as a working band. Now the room. AIR Montserrat closed after Hurricane Hugo tore through the island in 1989. 90% of the buildings on Montserrat damaged, the studio finished. George Martin could not face rebuilding it. Then in 1995, the Soufriere Hills volcano woke up, after 2,000 years of silence, and buried the south of the island. The studio is still standing, barely, on the edge of the exclusion zone, too fragile to walk into, ash and vines and a control room, where you can still see where the desks sat. The dining room where Stewart Copeland played the drums on Every Breath You Take is a ruin on a volcano. And here is the ending, and it is the reason I made this whole video. In 2025, Andy Summers and Stewart Copeland sued Sting in the High Court in London over songwriting and royalties reaching all the way back to an agreement the three of them made verbally in 1977, that whoever wrote a song would share 15% of it with the other two. They say they are owed in excess of $2 million in arrangers' fees on the digital life of the catalog. Sting's side has argued they may in fact have been substantially overpaid. Court records indicate he has paid them hundreds of thousands since the case was filed, and they are still seeking the rest. Stewart, asked about it recently, said the three of them get along just fine. It is not them in court, he said. It is the bean counters, somewhere over in London. Let me know how it works out. 42 years. They still cannot talk about this song directly. They still need somebody in the middle to carry the message. It used to be a producer with a talkback button in a control room on a volcano. Now it is lawyers,